Welcome to End of Life University on YouTube. Today, I'm sharing with you a podcast playlist, so to speak, which will recap previous episodes I've done on end of life doulas. I'll give you just a short little synopsis of each of those episodes. So if you're interested in learning more about end of life doulas, what they do, and how to get training to become one, you can listen to this episode and it will clue you in on some previous episodes that might have more information for you. So take a listen. And in the future, I'll probably do more of these playlists on other topics as well. If you haven't already, be sure and subscribe to this channel down below. Also, subscribe and leave a rating and review for the podcast wherever you happen to listen. And go to eoluniversity.com/support. And there you'll find 3 different ways you can help keep this show and the podcast on the air by making just a small contribution. About as much as a cup of coffee. So I hope you'll choose to help out. It will make a big difference. And we'll move on now with my podcast playlist on end of life doulas. Today, I'm sharing with you my podcast playlist on end of life doulas. And this will consist of a synopsis of some of the previous interviews I've done about end of life doulas, the work they do, and talking with some of the trainers who help train doulas. So if you're looking for information around end of life doulas, this episode will help you find previous interviews that you may want to tune into in order to learn more about it. I have placed a list of these episodes in the show notes along with a copy of the slides I've made for this episode. And you can go to YouTube to watch the video if you'd like, or you can just download the slides at eolupodcast.com. And I will also have a handout there that contains links to the previous episodes and also the websites of the speakers that I interview. So one way or another, you should be able to get plenty of resources around end of life doulas. So we're going to get started with the content I've prepared here. First of all, I just want to quickly tell you a few things about me in case you're new to the podcast. I am a retired hospice physician. I retired in order to start writing books and then also to do this podcast. And my first book is titled 7 Lessons for Living from the Dying, How to Nurture What Really Matters. And this is a newer version of the book published recently by Watkins Press in the UK. And this book contains stories of hospice patients I cared for at the end of their lives and the spiritual lessons I learned from them as I sat at the bedside offering them care. And truly, my hospice work was transformative in my life as a doctor and personally and spiritually as well. So I recorded these 7 lessons that I learned about how to live life better from working with my patients. And those lessons and the stories that tell how I learned them are recorded in this book, 7 Lessons for Living from the Dying. There is a sequel to this book called The Journey from Ego to Soul, which also talks about the same 7 lessons, but how I managed to put those in effect in my day-to-day life, how I actually learned to live those lessons. And we're talking about things like forgiveness and presence and purpose and surrender are some of the lessons. So this book follows the 7 lessons and goes a little deeper into how to actually live a more spiritual and transformed life with the lessons that we can learn from death itself. And I wanted to share with you a comment that I got from a reader who wrote to me, I just finished The Journey from Ego to Soul. The book, Your Life, is a treasured gift that can serve as a spark to light the firestorm of love. While my sharing with you may be limited, the book can open one to eternity unlimited presence here and now, existence, consciousness, bliss, the essence of our true self. So I will purchase a number of books to give to family, friends, and Death Cafe attendees. And I'm so grateful for that kind of feedback about the book. If it sounds like something you're interested in, you might want to check it out. That's The Journey from Ego to Soul, How to Transform Your Life When Everything Falls Apart. The next book I'll mention is Stories from the Dark Night, Writing as a Tool for Grief, which contains stories and essays that I wrote during my many long years of grieving over my father's death. And then finally, the book, The Tao of Death, which is an adaptation of the Tao Te Ching, a book of ancient Chinese philosophy. And I rewrote the book, applying it to the lessons that we learned from death. So I think you may find these books interesting. They're all available on Amazon or at my website, eoluniversity.com/books. And I encourage you to check those out. So now moving on to our interviews. The first one I wanted to mention was an interview with Suzanne OBrien, who is the founder of Doula Givers Institute. And we talked about training end-of-life doulas for the world. Suzanne has brought her training to many other countries around the world. And she has a free training that she offers, the free initial basic training for end-of-life doulas, which I highly recommend. We discussed what is an end-of-life doula, how EOL doulas can help with the current and future caregiver shortage, why doula training is helpful for everyone, and I truly believe this, including teachers, navigators, hospice workers, but even neighbors and family members. Everyone can benefit from receiving doula training. And you'll find out more about Suzanne's work at her website, for the Doula Givers Institute at doulagivers.com. Again, there will be links on the slides or the handout for this episode if you go to eolupodcast.com and look for episode 465. The next interview I wanted to share with you is with Felicity Warner, who's really one of our pioneer trainers of end-of-life doulas. She's located in the UK. We talked about her program, Midwife for the Soul, Easing Life's Final Passage. Felicity and I look back at death and dying 20 years ago and the changes that have taken place over time. We discuss the greatest challenges we face today in offering quality care to the dying, and what Felicity means by her term soul midwife, which she uses instead of end-of-life doula, how to prepare in order to be present with the dying, and why listening is the most important skill we can develop in our work. So Felicity is the founder of the Soul Midwives School, and you can learn more at soulmidwives.co.uk. Once again, that link will be in the show notes at eolupodcast.com. And you can also check out the slides and the handout where you can find out more about her website. Next, an interview with Zenith Vega, who lives in Australia. So this is kind of an international look at end-of-life doulas. We talk about the wisdom of a death walker for living and dying well. And Zenith and I discuss why each death worker must do their own work in coming to terms with mortality and really the importance of that. None of us can just dive into this work if we haven't started our own process of looking at the fact that we will also die in dealing with our emotions and even our denial around death. We talked about the importance of being able to sit with the mystery of death and not knowing how to fix things, which I believe is crucial for Western medicine at some point needs to come to terms with the fact that not everything can be fixed and we don't always have all the answers. That's sometimes where medicine goes awry in helping people face the end of life is trying too hard to come up with an answer and not acknowledging that there are just things that cannot be fixed or changed. And in those cases, we just need to be there and support people as they go through these experiences. Zenith talks about why every death has an equation that is unique and needs to be understood. And I like that term, and I like that thought that for each person who is dying, there's no cookie cutter approach or standardized approach. We have to view each person as an individual and find their particular unique equation in order to help them have the best end of life possible. And then also a little teaser. Zenith talks about the one question to ask each person on their deathbed. I'm not telling you what that is here. You can go back and listen to that interview with Zenith, which is episode 312. And Zenith is the founder of the Natural Death Care Center. And you can learn more at her website, Natural Death Care Center. And center is spelled CENTRE.org. Again, or go to the show notes, eolupodcast.com, and you'll find links there. So amazing conversation with Zenith Virago. She's also a pioneer in this field and someone with so much wisdom to share. With all of these teachers, that's actually been the case. Their wisdom is just profound and phenomenal. So next, an interview with Sarah Kerr. I've talked with Sarah a couple of times before. This one was on sacred death care and the death walker archetype. She also uses the term the death walker. And I really like this concept. Sarah has an idea of how to know if you're truly being called to work with people at the end of life, because it's part of your archetype, really just part of the DNA you were born with and why you came here. And in this really interesting conversation, we talk about how death care helps us merge our knowledge of science and spirituality, which that conversation is just so gratifying to me, because that's something as a doctor my whole life I've tried to put together science and spirituality in my own head, in my own life and how I live, and in my profession. So that was a really fun part of our conversation. Sarah explains what the Death Walker archetype is and how to know if it is active in your psyche. We talk about how Western medicine leaves out the soul when dealing with health issues, and why we need new maps for dying, death, and bereavement. And I like that thought that we need to have maps. No one has exactly the same journey, but it helps us to have a map to refer to. And Sarah is located in Canada. She's is the founder of the Center for Sacred Death Care. And you'll find that at the website sacreddeathcare.com. Center again is spelled CENTRE. So the British spelling for center. So also a truly wonderful interview to listen to. I encourage you to actually to listen to all of these if you have time, but there are certain ones that you shouldn't miss. And Sarah has great wisdom to share as well. Next, I am sharing an interview I did with Francesca Arnoldy on compassionate care training for end of life doulas. And we talk in this interview about the University of Vermont's EOL doula professional certificate. At the time of the interview, Francesca was working there and she actually helped create the program, but she has subsequently moved on. And so um, I wanted to share this interview anyway, even though Francesca isn't part of the program, because I want you to know about it. The University of Vermont professional certificate course, because it's an excellent course and it still exists, it's still there. And I wanted you to hear about it in Francesca's words. And so you can look it up if you're interested in getting training there. I know several people who've gone through the program and I highly recommend it. So Francesca and I talked about how the shift in death awareness seems to be accelerating right now. A number of people talked about that with me. The difference between sympathy, empathy, and compassion. And I really love this part of our discussion as well, what it means to truly hold space for others, how the doula program fills a gap in medical care and is being gradually accepted by the medical community in Vermont. So again, talking about a program that Francesca is no longer working for, but she's one of the creators of the program. So I encourage you to check out this episode and then go to the website for the UVM EOL Doula Professional Certificate. I will read you the URL, but you need to come to the show notes to find it, eolupodcast.com, because this one's too long to remember. It is learn.uvm.edu/program/ and each of these words have a hyphen in between them, end of life doula certificate. So anyway, check it out. And as I mentioned, Francesca is no longer there at this program. The interview still has a lot of value, however, and it's true for all of these interviews from the past. Time goes on, things change. So it's possible you'll hear about workshops or an offering in the interview that is not current, something that took place in the past. So keep that in mind. Just one caveat as you're listening, that the wisdom and all the advice are still there, but if there are specific links or trainings mentioned, they may not still be in existence, though in this case, the UVM Doula Professional Certificate Program is in place and highly recommended. Next, a conversation with Deanna Cochran, who's one of my most beloved doula trainers and teachers. And I've worked with her a number of times and spoken with her many times. And I absolutely love Deanna's work. We talked about hospice and EOL doulas. This particular episode was only one half of our conversation. We talked for a few hours, so it ended up becoming two different episodes. But in this particular episode, Deanna and I talked about why death doulas are needed now more than ever in our busy and understaffed healthcare system, how hospice care has changed over the years, how the medical system falls short of whole person care by focusing primarily on the physical aspect of patients, why personal experience matters a great deal in caring for the dying. And we talk a bit about Deanna's school, the Care Doula School of Accompanying the Dying, which you will find at the website certifiedcaredoula.com. And so, again, I share with you the teachers that I've interviewed about their work teaching end of life doulas so you can get familiar with them. Just by listening to them talk, you may get an idea who is the right person for you to work with. And I think that's really valuable and important for you because there are a lot of different people you could go to get training to be an end of life doula. It's most important that you find the person that you resonate with the most. So be sure and check out Deanna's interview and also her certifiedcaredoula.com website. Next, just recently, I did an interview with Alua Arthur about her book, Briefly Perfectly Human. And this is a wonderful interview. I love Alua's book and all the work that she's doing, and we have a fantastic conversation. We talked about what inspired Alua to get training as a death doula, about creating better boundaries as we do this work with people at the end of life, which is important for all of us, how death doula work can be financially viable, which is a big question these days and something a lot of people are wondering about, who are wondering if they could actually make a career out of this work or if it needs to be just a sideline or a hobby. We also talked about why education of the public is an essential foundation for the work we're doing. So every one of us needs to be a teacher. And then how the death space is welcoming to diverse people with a wide variety of skills. Alua is the founder of Going with Grace End of Life Training, also highly recommended. And you can learn more about it at goingwithgrace.com. But again, once you hear Alua talk about her training, how she works and why she does this work, I think you'll know right away if her program is the right fit for you. So I encourage you not to miss this interview, which was episode 455. So not that long ago that I had my conversation with Alua Arthur. And then an interview with Olivia Baram. And we talk about burial at sea and other sacred end of life rituals. Olivia started the Sacred Crossings Institute, and she's an amazing teacher and trainer for home funeral guides and also doulas. And I'll mention her work again when I do a playlist for funerals and home funerals. But I wanted to include her here because in Alua's interview, she mentioned getting training from Olivia when Alua was first starting to become a death doula. And Olivia's work is amazing. And we have a great conversation here all about burial at sea, which really fascinated me because I didn't know anything about it. I honestly didn't even know that that was a possibility. But Alua is doing burials at sea along with much other really interesting work. So we talk about how families and loved ones can participate in a sea burial, how to plan a full body sea burial, who might consider a sea burial for themselves or for a loved one. And then we also talked about how Olivia facilitates rituals, end of life rituals, on the one hand, for families of ICU patients who are being taken off life support. So, a really great conversation. Again, I love Olivia. I have the chance to be part of a workshop with her, to meet her personally, and highly recommend her work. There are just so many amazing teachers. We are honestly so gifted and so blessed in this field that so many wonderful people have stepped up and really devoted their lives not only to doing the work of death doulas and end of life guides themselves, but to be teaching other people how to do it. And so it's been my privilege to interview all these people and get to know them. And Olivia, being one person that I met fairly early on, Olivia Baram. Again, she started Sacred Crossings Institute, which you will find online at sacredcrossings.com/institute. And I highly encourage you to go there and check that out. Next, a conversation I had with Mary Lynn Rush. And we actually conducted this conversation during COVID times, during the COVID lockdown. So it's a little outdated. You'll hear us mention COVID and what people were experiencing at the time. But I wanted to include this interview because we talk about Mary Lynn's training program, the Dying Year End of Life Doula Training. And so, again, some of it hopefully doesn't apply very much anymore, but it's a flashback to the COVID lockdown days. And so bear with us on that, but it is a chance to get to hear from Mary Lynn and hear about the work she's doing. So we talk about why early hospice admissions are important for hospital and long-term care patients, tips for EOL doulas to stay in touch with patients when visits aren't possible. And that was very significant and important during COVID days, but can still be a factor now because some of us might be working remotely. You know, we may find we have clients that don't live near us, so we can't actually do in-person work. And so these tips from Mary Lynn are still valid and still helpful, and the importance of advanced care planning in the face of pandemics and acute healthcare emergencies such as COVID. And then once again, Mary Lynn's training is called the Dying Year End of Life Doula Training. It's at thedyingyear.org. So I encourage you to take a listen, bear with us as we talk about COVID too, but know that you'll get to hear about Mary Lynn's training program during this interview and get familiar with Mary Lynn and her work. Next, a great resource. If you are a death doula already or interested in becoming one, you should know about the work of Joanne Hahn and Karen Hendrickson from the UK, who have started Death Doula Network International, which is a community for death doulas. And it's a great place to become a member, to get ongoing training, but also to just meet other death doulas because I know some Some end-of-life doulas end up working in more rural and remote areas, and they really don't have any peers where they live to connect with and talk with. And their death doula community is just a great place to meet like-minded people and perhaps team up or find someone you could collaborate with. It's wonderful networking. At the time of this particular interview, their network was actually called Death Doula Network British Columbia, which is where they're located. But they subsequently changed the name and expanded it to become Death Doula Network International. So that is the new link, ddnint.com. And as you're listening, once again, remember that sometimes links change and names change for things. So it has now expanded into an international organization and not just in British Columbia. So the three of us talk about the role of the death doula for filling gaps in end of life care, something I've discussed with other people as well. How a doula community allows creative potential to arise for each individual and foster collaboration, the need for community wide education about loss and end of life issues. And so this is just the beginning. If you get involved with Death Doula Network International, there's so many resources they have to offer for you. So I highly encourage you to check that out, ddnint.com. But take a listen to this interview first and get to know Joanne and Karen. Next, another resource that you simply must have if you are a death doula or thinking about about becoming one, and that is a guidebook called the Doula Toolkit. I just noticed there's a mistake on the slides. I wrote the Doula Toolkit, the Doula Toolkit, a guide for end-of-life doulas. It was written by Diane Button, Gabby Elise Jimenez, and Angela Shook, and I interviewed all three of them in episode 441. And we talk about why a doula toolkit is needed right now for new doulas after training, what's included in the book, who can benefit from the contents of the book, the power of collaboration and why we need more of it in the end of life field, why the book is not just for doulas, but also for lay people and family caregivers. And the Doula Toolkit, the complete practical guide for end of life doulas and caregivers, is available on Amazon. You can go there to pick up the book, and I will leave a link to it in the show notes. Also, it's in the slides. It will be in the slides and the handout that goes along with the slides. If you're interested in getting that book, I highly recommend it, that you just keep it on your shelf. It will be really handy and also a great gift if you know someone who is a caregiver or is planning to become an end of life doula. Next, a wonderful interview I did with Reverend Bodie B. And we talk about his program, Doorway into Light, showing up for death, nourishing life. We talked about how hospice care has changed over the years, how death doulas are changing the conversation about death and dying for the better. The international death doula training Bodhi offers annually in Maui, his future vision of a conservation burial ground and a guest house for the dying. And so I wanted to tell you this. We did this interview a few years ago, but the death doula training is still going on this year, September 19th to the 23rd, 2024. Coming up soon, Doorway into Light, death doula training on Maui. Fabulous training. And I highly recommend it. I know some people who've attended it more than once, and I know some of the teachers who have gone there to help teach. So, Death Doula training on Maui, September 19th to the 23rd, 2024. Go to the website doorwayintolight.org/education. And I hope you get a chance to take advantage of this wonderful training. You won't be sorry if you do go, and what an amazing time to visit Maui as well. So that is the end of this playlist for End of Life Doulas. I wanted to remind you that there are 3 different ways you can support this podcast. You can buy me a coffee whenever you enjoy a particular episode, and there's always a link in the show notes. You can donate on PayPal if you use PayPal and that's your preferred method. You can just make a one-time donation of any amount at any time. You can also join my community on Patreon. If you do join the Patreon community, you receive bonuses. There's some merchandise that you receive when you sign up. And you'll also get monthly bonuses like an end of life news update once a month, and then also a what to watch recording where I recommend programming that's available on streaming networks and other channels that you can watch that deal with end of life issues. So to find out about these 3 ways of supporting the podcast, you can go to the show notes at eolupodcast.com. There will be links there. You can also go to eoluniversity.com/support, and you'll find links for these 3 methods of supporting the podcast there as well. So I do encourage you to make a contribution if you can. I really appreciate it. And I want to thank everyone who has been making donations ongoing for several years now. It's really helpful and it means everything to me. So that's all for this this playlist today. I hope you enjoyed it. And again, I'll be doing this again in the future. So stay tuned for more playlists. I hope you found my playlist and summaries of previous episodes on End of Life Doulas helpful. And remember, I'll be coming back in the future from time to time with more of these playlists so that you can get the most out of the archives of the End of Life University podcast. So until the next time we're together, take care. Bye-bye.